This tutorial is part of iOS Get Started using Xcode and Swift programming version 4.2. And in last few weeks that we were talking about how we can design the UI view and UI table view and some kind of navigation among the scenes. So this is the last part of the navigation controller using in the project. So this is the last part, and this is in in this tutorial that we will use a lot of coding, and most of the navigation part we have implemented so far will be finalized in this tutorial. So this is our working tutorial, and we have implemented the behavior of save and cancels for adding a new meal to this meal table view. So I will use the gist 2 for the week 7, and the first thing we want to do here is that we want to add a new sigage in our project. Currently we have um, a kind of sigage connecting all the scenes through the navigation controller. So in this case that this sigage with a name like add-add sigage is connecting from this add button to this scene, and we want to add a new sigage from this cell to this scene. So to do that, we need to make sure that we are selecting the correct uh, cell element of this table view. So sometimes if you are clicking on some part of the cells, sometimes you might be clicking on the UI element put on top of the cells. So I suggest you to use this object tree, and you can easily pick up the me table view cell identifier. This is the complete part of the cell, and I want to press control key and drag and drop to the scene. So when you release it, so you can drop any part of the scene, and when you release it, there will be a kind of pop-up menu, and you can choose show. You can choose show here. Okay, now you got a new sigage. So to make it clear that I will put on this navigation controller a little bit lower. Then you can see clearly that there are two sigage. The one is going through this way, and another is connecting straight to the second scene. And before we do anything, that I want to identify different sigage. So using this attribute inspector, that when I click on this sigage, that its identifier is item at item, and if you click on another one that we just added and it doesn't have the name yet, so I want to give it a name that something like show detail. So show detail. So this is a kind of ID of this sigage. So I'm using the capitalized word for both the beginning and all the words following, and there is no space between that, and this become an ID for the SIGH. So whenever you want to access to this SIGH, you can call this name from the code. And when you finish your typing, press enter to make sure that these changes are being saved. Alright, so now we have two SIGH. This one, it is coming from this add button to this scene, and this SIGH is coming from the UI table view cell to this scene. So what we want to do here is that when the user tap on the cell, that we want to open app with the name and title and the photo being selected from this cells. So for earlier we were making the link from the add. In this case, we don't need to worry much about passing this data to the second scene, because we will just add a new name and the image. But in this part, that what we are trying to do is we touch and we show the relevant content on the second scene. So in this case, we need to work on both sides, and we also need to work on some kind of data passing from the first scene to second scene. So we will use the kind of method called prepare for SIGH. So before we pass the control from this first scene to second scene, that we will do some kind of preparation. Basically that we identify, we detect which cell is being tapped, and based on the index of the cell, that we will prepare a meal object, and using the data from the meals array. And after that, we prepare that meal object, and then we will set it to the meal object inside this meal view controller. So this part we will do that. So firstly, that we will declare about that library use import os.log inside the meal table view controller. So I will go to the meal table view controller, and I will go to the top of the program, and I add this import statement. And second part is that we need to override a kind of prepare for SIGH method. So I copy all this part, and I will move down to this bottom of the code, because there are some kind of code written here. This is exactly the same method that we need to implement, override function prepare for SIGH. But just to save the time, I prepare the code inside the gist file, so I will just copy and paste the code here. So this is the part of navigation. Okay, there will be some kind of warning because there are some kind of conflict in version, but you can ignore this warning. They will not stop you, and they will not cause your program to stop running, but it's just a kind of warning. Okay, so let's read the code a little bit more. This code saying that it is preparing for the SIGH, and sender can be any. As usual, that before we do anything, we call our super method, passing the same parameter we receive, and then we use the switch statement, and we pick up the SIGH identifier. So earlier we mentioned that we have two identifier, that is there are two SIGH. One is named as add item, and second one is show detail. So we will turn on the switch, and we try to use this SIGH dot identifier method or if we don't find anything, we just say empty string. So in this case, this string, if it is matching to that add item, in this case that we are just adding a new meal, so we don't need to prepare anything special. We just pass the control to the second scene, meal view controller. So in this case, we are not doing anything, but we just write a kind of log entry that what we are doing, just to trace back the step of the program. So in the case of show detail, so that is the second cgh that we just added. So in this case, for the show detail cgh case, that what we have to do is we need to prepare the mail object. So the first thing is we are trying to get the reference of the second scene, the mail view controller. So the advantage of the cgh is if we have the reference for the cgh, we can always retrieve the source and destination view controllers. So in this case that we are retrieving the cgh destination. So that means that it is the second scene, that is the mail view controller. So we try to retrieve it and we try to typecast it as a mail view controller and put in that mail detail view controller scene, constant. So this is the step we doing some kind of typecasting. So to prevent from failing the program, that we need to put inside this guard block. And if something go wrong, something is not working as expected, for example, the destination is not this mail view controller object, in this case we will write a kind of error message. So this is the part that we get the reference of the second scene mail view controller. And this part, what we are trying to get is that we try to get the kind of reference for the cells that being selected or that being tapped. So center can be anything. So in our example, that the center can be the mail table view cell. So we try to typecast it and we try to put as a reference. And in case it failed, that we will write a kind of error message. So once we get the kind of reference for the cell, that we can use that reference and we can retrieve the index part for that. So using the table view dot index part method, we can retrieve a kind of index part that we will need. So using that index part, that we can use as a kind of index for the mails array, and we retrieve the data and put in this object. So basically this object will have the kind of information for the selected meal. So this is the last stage, that what we need to do is that we just put this newly created meal object, we put it in the meal object of the second scene, the meal view controller. In other words, inside this program block, that we call it mail detail view controller. So basically we are getting the mail data object and then put it in the second scene view controller. So these are the case, and in Swift programming, that all the case must be exhausted. So that means that you must include these default statement every time when you use the switch statement. Okay, this is a part of the preparation. So once the app delegate detect a kind of gestures like tapping on the cells, that it will call this method to prepare for the Cgauge. Alright, so let's move to the next part. So we have prepared the data and put into the second scene. So we need to do some kind of modification to the second scene mail view controller. So the modification part is that I will copy this block of codes and I copy this and I will go to mail view controller and I go to the view did load method and I will make some space inside view did load. So basically that what we are trying to do is that during the time that we prepare the view inside the view did load method, that we are checking. So look at this statement. We are checking that let meal assign meal. That means that uh, they look the same, like me, not even some case. Uh, they are all small letter and small letter here. But here what we can understand is that this meal is the one that is we declare as a kind of uh, class variable, that is basically it is visible to all the methods used in this class. So this meal is a kind of a local variable. This meal only exists and is only visible inside this block of the code. So we are trying to assign this meal class level object into our local local constant meal. So we try this operation, and if this operation is successful, that means if statement. If this kind of assignment operation is successful, that means that this meal object has some data, is already initialized and it has data inside. In this case, this operation will be successful. So this is a kind of checking that is the meal has the data or not. That means what kind of Cgauge we are being activated and through which Cgauge we arrive to this second scene. For example, um, if user click on the add button and now we are seeing this, in this case there is no way to get this meal object inside this mail view controller to be initialized. So in this case, this assignment will be failed and we don't need to do anything inside this block. But if the user tap on the cell and then we perform some kind of prepare for Cgauge method, in this case, the mail object inside this second scene mail view controller, that the object will be initialized and there will be data inside. So in this case, that this kind of assignment will be successful. It will return the kind of Boolean value that true. So in this case, that if this operation is successful, then we will execute the code written in this curly bracket. So what we are trying to do is that getting the data from the mail object, from this mail object, and putting it on the scene, putting on the title of the scene in the dust files, and also retrieve the mail photo and put in the image view placeholder. So this is the part of the modification in this view did load method of the mail view controller. So this view did load method will be called upon the preparation of the view of the second scene. Alright, so the next stage is that we need to okay, so before I move on, I want to run this program and I will see you what we have achieved so far. So okay, I run this code and you will see some kind of behavior that we are expecting. So when I click here, then I can see this with this data. And if I so this is the code that we have implemented, and this is the result that as we expected. But when we click on save, do you notice that a new mail is created and saved into it? So if I do another thing and do some kind of modification and press enter and save it, it also happened the same. So it is happening because so far what we have done is that before we go to the next thing, we will prepare the data and put the data in. But when we hit the save button, that we are not doing anything particular, so it is taking that action the same way as we use that add button. So it always try to add as a new object into this table view. So the next step, what we have to do is that we need to find a way that so that this after arriving to the second scene, on the way back, we need to think about whether whether we come from so add button or the table cells. Another thing is you notice that when we try to click on the cancel button, it doesn't work because this the second scene is not presented by a navigation controller like the way we did in this posted side. In this case, we can click cancel, but in this case, we cannot click on cancel. So they are the things that we need to fix. So let's move on, writing some extra code to control this behavior. So we have a method called adding to mail list written inside the mail table view controller. So earlier that what we have written here is this part inside the code, because there is only one way to come back to the first scene. It is just adding the mail. So whatever the action we have taken, that it is treating exactly only one way, that adding a new mail. So we need to modify this add to mail list method to check the condition and to implement accordingly. So I will copy this if else block starting from the if statement up to the end of the else block. I'll copy this and I go to this mail table view controller, and I will go to this method and went to mail list. So this part, it is trying to add a new mail and append to the mails array and refresh the table. So I will comment these things out. To make a block comment, we use that star and slash, and I will paste what I copy from the gist file. So before these two closing curly brackets. Alright, so this is the part we copy. So now, instead of just adding every time when it comes back, that we check the condition. So the way to check is that in case that user tap on the add button of the menu bar of the top bar, then we will do this part. But if the user tap on the cells, so that means user select one of the cells in the table view. So in this case that we will have some kind of uh, record that which row of the table view is being selected. So we try to assign this the reference of that row, reference of the cells into this selected index part. And we try to do this operation, this kind of assignment operation. And if this is successful, that means that the user tap on the table cells and go to the second scene. So we can verify insert in that way. So when if we can assign this successfully, that means some of the cells of the table is being tapped. So that means user was going from first scene to another using the second gauge called show detail. So this is the way we identify. So if the user is using that show detail gauge and by tapping on that cells, then we will do these two operations. So it is the same as we will add a meal. In this case, that we use this selected index part dot row. That means rather than adding at the bottom of at the end of the array, we will replace or we will overwrite the meal object at the index at the selected index part. So we will overwrite that meal object in that meals array. And also in the table view that we will reload rows, especially for the index part that earlier the user tapped. So the difference between this block and this block is that this one try to replace on that selected cell, and this one try to add a new cell or a new element of the array of this program. All right. So the last thing that we want to do is about implementation of the cancel action. So I will copy some code here about this cancel button behavior. And the cancel button is in the mail view controller. So I will go to this and okay, this is the cancel method. So I will comment this code out and I will paste what I copy here. Remember, this is we are doing in the mail view controller. So in the cancel method, earlier all we need to do is just dismiss, because the second scene is being presented using navigation controller. So if we just dismiss it, then we will go back to the first scene. But now we have two gauge and the behaviors are different, so we need to detect this. So the first thing we do is look at this. Presenting view controller is UI navigation controller. So this is the way of checking that how the second scene is being presented, in which way. So presenting view controller is a kind of built-in object, and we are checking that it is a kind of operator checking the type. And if this checking is true, that means it is being presented using navigation controller, then we can retrieve we can get the value, and we can get the boolean value as true. So in this case, it's presenting in at real mode become at meal mode become true. So it is true in this case. We can it is true, that means that it is being presented using navigation controller. So we will do exactly the same as what we did before. Else if let this ON navigation controller equal navigation controller again. So else if, that means, so so the view is not presented by the navigation controller again, and we check another condition, that the only new navigation controller. So that is another checking that it is uh, making the own navigation controller or not. We check in the first statement, that is, it is UI navigation controller. Second thing is it is uh, your own method of navigation controller. So if it is true, then what we do is that we get this navigation controller reference and we use the different method called pop view controller animated true. So this is very much about language specifics. So for the time being, just try to memorize this kind of approach. If you want to know more about this, you can refer to this kind of documentation of the Swift programming. So if the statement, if neither of them is happening, then we have a kind of else statement and we issue a kind of fatal error message. Okay, so these are the things that all we need to do relating to this kind of navigation between first things and second thing. So I will run this program. And now when I click on that, for let's say, and when I press enter and when I click on save, then it, rather than adding as a new cell, now it is replace the first cells in the table view. And if I click add, and if I say visit, sorry, I don't have pizza photo, so I will just choose a kind of waterfall and click save. Then this is behaving like this. And I click here, and if I say cancel, I can always go back. Alright, these are the things that we want to do as part of the navigation. So I want to go to the next action that allow to delete the cells of this table view. So basically what I want to do is I want to add a kind of button called edit around here, and when the user tap on this, then it will allow you to delete some of the cells that we want. Okay, so let's go back to the code. So deleting of the cells seems to be complicated, but with the help of the Swift programming and that iOS UI kit, it's become very easy. All we need to do is only a small modification at the 3 places, at 3 points, and then we can achieve this delete operation. So let's take a look. So the first thing that we need to do is that we need to add this edit button item. So I copy this code and I will go to the mail table view controller and I go to the top of the program. It is where we can find this kind of view did load method, and I paste what I copy here. So this is basically a navigation item that is referred to this all the navigation item in the available in the scene, and this is the location left bar button item, and we add a new kind of system button called edit button item. So with this statement we can get a kind of new button on the top bar. So second thing what we need to do is that we need to modify a little bit. So at the very beginning of this project, that when we create this class me data view controller, that the uh, we choose the class type to be UI data view controller. So we choose that UI data view controller as a kind of parent class that we are trying to extend. So when we have this program code, that there are several codes put in the created file with comment everywhere. So that means that you can just follow these kind of codes and you just modify a little bit up to your need. So the first thing is that I will remove this comment statement. So basically I'm enabling the conditional editing. So its default return value is true, so I don't need to change anything special. So basically it is telling the app delegate that this table you can edit. So the second part is that override to support the editing the table view. So this is a method that we need to implement. So I delete this comment out, and these are the stage that we are doing. And oh, sorry, let me this is editing style. Delete the row from, yeah, should be okay. Strange, I'm getting this error. So anyway, let's take a look. So what I do is I just copy, delete the row from the data source, that I paste what I copy here, and I get in this error. So let me stop the project and see what is this going on. Me delivery controller to suit. This should be okay. I'm getting the strange error, so let's see. Okay, it seems that now it's working properly. So basically that if we are using the kind of cert version 4.2 and using the OS code, this shouldn't be a problem. But I think I've been using this computer yesterday and it is okay, but now it has some kind of issues. It could be the problem about the version update. Anyway, so uh, all we need to do is that just adding one line of code, that is uh, we remove one of the object from that meals array. So these are the things that we need to do in these three stages. So now we can try this program. So now you can see the edit button here, and when you click on that, you have a kind of a minus sign, and you can click delete. And when you finish the operation, hit done, and you are all settled. You are all set. Okay, thank you for your watching, and I hope you have a wonderful day.